If humanity has one mission, it is to survive. For as long as we've existed, we've tried to escape death. Not just to live longer, but to live forever. We've told stories, built machines, and spent fortunes, all chasing one thing: immortality. This is the Immortality Iceberg, a collection of everything we've tried, imagined, and believed to cheat death. As always with the iceberg format, the higher levels are pretty well known, but as we go deeper, things get stranger, less certain, and darker. Make sure to subscribe, and with that, let's begin. The Fountain of Youth. The Fountain of Youth is a legendary spring said to restore youth to anyone who drinks or bathes in its waters. It's a concept that seems to reappear across cultures and centuries. Herodotus described a mysterious source of water in Ethiopia that gave long life. In medieval Europe, tales of hidden springs promised healing and vitality. The myth speaks to something universal: the desire not just to live longer, but to reset. In the West, the story is most famously linked to Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon, who, according to popular legend, searched for the fountain during his 1513 expedition to what is now Florida. But the historical truth is a bit muddy. There's no solid evidence that he was ever seriously hunting such a spring, and the connection may have been added later, possibly by rivals as a way to mock his ambitions. Either way, the image stayed. Artists painted it, writers retold it, and tourists today still visit the Fountain of Youth Archaeological Park to relive his story. The myth has persisted likely not because of proof, but because it somehow made emotional sense and still does. The Fountain of Youth is ultimately about the timeless dream of undoing decay and the uncomfortable truth that it might be just a dream. Cryionics. What if death is just a waiting room? Cryionics is the practice of preserving a human body, or sometimes just the brain, at ultra-low temperatures after legal death, in the hope that future science will be able to somehow revive it. The process involves vitrification, which is basically turning bodily fluids into a glass-like state to minimize damage. At least that's the idea. The concept took hold in the 1960s. Companies like Alcor and the Cryonic Institute store hundreds of bodies in metal tanks right now, quietly waiting for a tomorrow that may never come. The cryonic community hopes that future scientists come up with advanced technology to revive the bodies. So there is no process currently to reverse the damage or even test the viability of any of these bodies to be revived. And there are even cases of bodies being unfrozen because of a power outage. But the cryonic dream is real, not as proven science, but as a wager against extinction. It assumes a future in which medicine can fix what death has broken, and memory, identity, and consciousness are somehow recoverable from frozen matter. To its critics, it's a sci-fi fantasy wrapped in false hope. To its believers, it's the only rational response to a terminal problem. The Philosopher's Stone. Before science, there was alchemy, and at the heart of it was a stone that could cheat both poverty and death. The Philosopher's Stone was a legendary substance believed to transform base metals like lead into gold and grant immortality through the elixir of life. But it wasn't just about wealth. Alchemists saw it as the key to spiritual perfection, a material symbol of inner transformation. To create the stone was to purify not only matter, but the dirty human soul. The story persisted not because it was intrinsically true, but because it made sense to a world where death was constant and gold ruled everything. By the 18th century, alchemy faded into chemistry, but the Philosopher's Stone never really disappeared. It still lives in modern metaphors, fiction, games, and fringe science. It's still a dream that some perfect formula could rewrite the laws of reality. Biological immortality. Immortality may not come from myth or machine, but from a jellyfish the size of our pinky nail. The immortal jellyfish possesses a biological trick that borders on science fiction. When threatened, injured, or simply old, it can reword its adult cells into its juvenile form. This process, known as transdifferentiation, rewires the creature's cells to switch roles. Muscle can become nerve, digestive tissue can become reproductive. It's not a perfect loop, many die from predation or disease, but in theory, the jellyfish has no fixed lifespan. First discovered in the Mediterranean Sea and now quietly spreading across oceans, it challenges one of biology's core assumptions that aging is irreversible. While its simplicity makes it different from complex organisms like humans, researchers are still trying to understand how this mechanism works and whether its principles could somehow be applied to humans. Vampires. Your first thought might be Twilight and Dracula. However, these winged garlic-hating creatures are one of the oldest mythological representations of eternal life. Long before fanged aristocrats in Gothic castles, cultures across the world told stories of beings who fed on the living to avoid death. Ancient Mesopotamian legends spoke of Lamashtu, a demon who preyed on blood. In China, the Jiangshi, a stiff hopping corpse, drained life energy. Slavic folklore, from which much of the modern vampire myth originates, described revenants who rose from their graves to feast on relatives and neighbors. What unites them all is the idea of parasitic immortality, life extended not through virtue or wisdom, but by extracting vitality from others. Blood becomes, in a way, a currency, bloody capitalism. The vampire myth was frequently used to explain plagues, unexplained deaths, or the mystery of decomposition. But it also reflects the fear of death and the suspicion that someone somewhere has found a way to avoid it. Modern interpretations romanticize the vampire as tragic, even noble, but the core idea remains unchanged. To live forever, something else has to die. Brian Johnson. What happens when a millionaire treats aging like a startup? Brian Johnson, former CEO and founder of Kernel and Braintree, is best known not for being dead, but for trying to not die. Through a self-funded project called Blueprint, Johnson has assembled a team of over 30 doctors and scientists to optimize every measurable aspect of his biology. The goal is clear: reverse the clock on every organ in his body. His routines are extreme to say the least. Dozens of supplements, vegan meals weighed down to the gram, strict sleep cycles, constant biometric monitoring, and even blood plasma infusions, once involving samples from his own teenage son. Johnson claims to have reduced his biological age by several years across various organs, calling himself the world's most measured human. While some metrics show promise, others remain statistically shallow. Critics see a tech-fueled bio-obsession chasing immortality through marginal gains. Johnson may be a prophet or just a well-funded outlier testing the limits. Legacy and memory. This entry is about the idea that people can live on through what they leave behind. Some call it symbolic immortality. You make something, a piece of art, a discovery, a family, a business, or a memory, and it stays after you're gone. People remember you. Your name comes up in conversations. Maybe something you did keeps helping others long after you're not around. It's not eternal life and it doesn't stop aging or death, but it's something real, something people actually achieve, and with all the crazy entries coming your way, this might be the closest any of us might get to being immortal. Boring, right? Let's keep going. Transhumanism. What if the next step in evolution has nothing to do with nature? Transhumanism is the belief that humanity can, and maybe should, transcend its biology. Not through myth and prayer, but through tools. It's the modern Prometarian fire, using technology to reforge the human experience from the ground up. At its core is attention. The body ages, fails and dies, but the mind, in theory, can be copied. So why let it rot inside something so fragile? Transhumanists imagine a world where disease isn't treated, it's deleted. Where memory isn't lost but backed up. Where intelligence is extended by machines. Which is already the case if you ask me. Transhumanism isn't necessarily about living longer, but to live beyond what's ever been possible. To think faster, to feel deeper, and maybe even to choose what it means to be human in the first place. But for all its ambition, there's something deeply human underneath. It's the quiet hope that if we just build the right machine, we might never have to say goodbye again. Religion and afterlife concepts. Long before science tried to halt death, religion offered a way to transcend it. Across cultures and centuries, afterlife beliefs have framed the soul as something untouchable by time. In Christianity, eternal life is granted through salvation, in which the heavens serves as a timeless realm beyond death. Hinduism and Buddhism speak of samsara, the cycle of birth and rebirth, with the nirvana as the escape hatch from mortality itself. Islamic religion offers paradise to the faithful and a perfect eternity after judgment. In ancient Egypt, they preserved the body for a journey into the Duat, the realm of the dead. And Northern mythology promised warriors an immortal feast in Valhalla. While the details differ, the core idea is somewhat consistent. Death is not the end, but a threshold. The soul, spirit, or consciousness continues, sometimes changing form, sometimes facing judgment, but always moving forward. This spiritual immortality isn't about defeating biology, it reframes death as a transition, not a failure. And in doing so, it provides something Cryionics and code still struggle to offer, which is meaning. Neurolink. Neurolink is actively being used as a medical device, a coin-sized implant meant to restore lost functions. It helps people with paralysis move, and it could restore vision or even reconnect memory. It works by reading your brain's signals, translating them into code, and then sending them out. So it's basically bridging gaps where the body has failed. But beneath the clinical goal lies a different kind of promise. In the background of every demo and every headline is the echo of something much bigger, the merging of mind and machine. In transhumanist circles, Neuralink isn't just a tool, it's a doorway, the beginning of a future where thoughts move through networks, where identity can be preserved outside the body, where consciousness becomes portable. Elon Musk frequently walks that line, one foot in medical science, the other in science fiction. Publicly, he talks about helping patients. Quietly, he wonders about backing up the brain and digitizing the soul. The science isn't there yet. The brain is messy as it turns out, and the risks are pretty high. But the myth has already taken hold that someday a piece of hardware, smaller than a coin, might let us rewrite what it means to be alive. Life extension supplements. In the world of anti-aging, some people turn not to machines or labs, but to bottles. Pills that promise to slow things down, maybe not stop death, but buy time. You'll hear names like resveratrol, NMN, or metformin, each one with a theory behind it. Protect the cells, boost the repair, trick the body into thinking it's younger than it is. Some of it works in mice already, and some of it might work in people. The science is still unfolding, and most results are hopeful at best, but the sales say enough, because the idea is simple. A capsule in the morning, another one before sleep, and maybe you get to see a little more of the future. Senolytics. Over time, the body collects senescent cells, which are basically damaged or worn out. They stop doing their job, but they don't die. They just linger around like my mom's new boyfriend. These are cells that were once useful, skin cells, blood cells, organ cells, but now they're just ghosts of themselves. They're taking up space, sending out the wrong signals, and quietly dragging everything down with them. They leak inflammation, they confuse the system. And the longer they stay, the faster everything else seems to fall apart. Senolytics are drugs designed to do what the body wants. Identify these so-called zombie cells and remove them. In animal studies, the effect has been pretty good. Old mice get stronger, their hearts beat better, their fur thickens, and ultimately, they live longer. Human trials are still early, but the idea is somewhat elegant. Just take out the trash and you'll live longer. Caloric restriction. It's one of the oldest ideas in anti-aging science and still one of the most debated. Live longer by eating less. In animals, the effects are pretty striking. Cut calories by 20 to 30% and lifespan stretches. The body shifts into a kind of survival mode. Metabolism slows, stress resistance rises, and repair mechanisms kick in. In humans, it's, as always, less clear. Some benefit, others don't. It depends on genetics, habits, and how far you are willing to go. Caloric restriction rewires hormones, dampens inflammation, and alters how cells behave. In the end, it's a complete physiological shift that might give those who practice it a few more moments. Immortality Bus. Immortality Bus is about turning the fight against death into a cross-country road trip. In 2015, transhumanist presidential candidate Certins drove a 38-foot coffin-shaped bus across the United States. The goal was to promote life extension, challenge the inevitability of death, and bring immortality ideas to the public. Along the way, he gave interviews, met scientists, debated skeptics, and made a spectacle wherever he parked. The campaign didn't win any votes or change policy, but it did get people talking, and maybe that was the point. Telomerase activation. At the end of your chromosomes are telomeres. They are tiny caps that protect your DNA, and they look a bit like these small plastic things on your shoelaces. Every time a cell divides, these caps get shorter. When they become too short, the cell stops dividing altogether. And that's where telomerase joins the lobby. It's an enzyme that can rebuild telomeres and theoretically extend a cell's lifespan. Activate it and the clock rewinds. Some researchers see this as a key to slowing down aging, but there is a catch. Some cancer cells seem to activate telomerase to divide uncontrollably. So the same mechanism that slows aging down might also feed the very thing that kills us. It's a powerful lever, but pull too hard and you tip from regeneration into mutation. Immortality is a double-edged sword. Blue zones. Blue zones are 5 regions around the world. Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Italy, Nicoya in Costa Rica, Icaria in Greece, and Loma Linda in California, where people frequently live past 100. They don't chase breakthroughs, they don't live on supplements or implants, Their lives are just built on patterns: slow mornings, long walks, fresh fruit, and deep friendships. They garden, they cook, they love, and they do it every day. Researchers have spent decades trying to decode them, looking for genetic secrets, magic foods, ancient rituals, but the answer seems to lie in something much more mundane. It's the system, the way everything fits together, a kind of ecosystem of small good choices repeated for a lifetime. Plant-based diets, natural movement, family bonds, a sense of purpose that doesn't fade with age. They just don't retire from being happy. Living longer by turning yourself to simplicity instead of pills and doctors. A soothing thought, if you ask me. Digital immortality. Digital immortality imagines a future where a person's thoughts, voice, and personality can live on in a digital world. It starts, of course, with data. Messages, recordings, emails. Everything you've ever typed, said, or shared becomes a kind of blueprint. From that, an AI can be trained to mimic how you talk, how you think, and maybe even how you joke. The early versions already exist, and they are unsettling. Chatbots that respond like a lost loved one, and AI voices that speak in the tone of the dead. They are called deadbots, and yes, they are as strange as they sound, and yes, they are already there. Projects like Replica, for example, offer companionship that feels almost real, but they raise uncomfortable questions. Who owns your voice after you're gone? What counts as you, and what's just an imitation? Because in the end, consciousness isn't just information, right? Parabiosis. In 2005, a strange experiment showed that when the circulatory systems of an old and a young mouse were stitched together, the older mouse began to rejuvenate. This ancient concept, young blood restoring vitality, suddenly had a measurable result. The procedure is called parabiosis, and in animals it seems to improve muscle repair, brain function, and organ health. Biostasis. Biostasis is the science of slowing down the body's biology, usually by lowering its temperature to buy time. In emergency medicine, doctors are experimenting with rapidly cooling patients by putting them into a near-frozen state to delay death while repairs are made. It's not about decades in the freezer like in Cryionics, it's about minutes and maybe hours, but just enough to maybe turn the impossible into a second chance. But it is risky. Go too cold and you might do significant damage. Wait too long and the pause becomes permanent. Still, in a moment where every second counts, even a short delay can mean the difference between dying and walking away. Epigenetic clocks. Epigenetic clocks are tools that estimate your biological age by tracking chemical changes on your DNA that shift as you age. These patterns don't rewrite your genes, but they affect how genes are expressed, and they accumulate with lifestyle, stress, and disease. One of the most famous, Horvath's clock, can predict biological age with surprising accuracy. In some cases, researchers have shown that certain treatments like diet, exercise, or medication might slow or even reverse these markers. It reframes aging not as a number but as a code, a signal that can be read, modified, and maybe someday even reset. Biogerontology. Biogerontology is the science of aging, and it asks one of the oldest questions in biology. Why do our bodies break down, and can we slow that process? We've already dipped into this field with Senolytics, caloric restriction, and epigenetic clocks, but the field itself is broader. It looks at what happens in the body over time, how cells lose function, how systems wear down, and how damage builds up year after year. Scientists in the space study how and why we age. They look at everything from cell behavior to immune response and try to find patterns that shape our health over a lifetime, and then find solutions to make our lives better. The Mephosella Foundation. In the Bible, Mephosella lived for 969 years. In the modern world, his name funds a mission to challenge aging itself. The Mephosella Foundation was launched in 2003 by David Goebel and Aubrey de Grey, two of the loudest voices in the life extension movement. The message is simple: aging isn't destiny, it's a puzzle, and puzzles can be solved. Instead of waiting for breakthroughs, the foundation tries to spark them. They fund biotech startups, offer cash prizes for scientific progress, and support experiments in tissue growth, organ repair, and cellular rejuvenation. Their goal is clear: to make 90 feel like 50 by the year 2030. Certins. Certins are a group of proteins that help the body respond to stress. They play a quiet but important role by regulating how cells repair themselves and how energy is used. They are especially active during fasting or caloric restriction. When resources are low, Certins shift the body from growth to survival, focusing on repair instead of expansion. And that shift might be the key to living longer. In simple organisms like yeast and worms, boosting Certin activity has extended lifespan. In mice, the results are more complex but still promising. Years ago, a compound called resveratrol found in red wine was believed to activate Certins. While this is true and the effects on mice are positive, studies on humans are not that promising. We don't fully understand how Certins work, but they may be part of the reason why stress under the right circumstances can be good for us. Kinshi Wang's elixir. Kinshi Wang's elixir is about chasing eternal life until it kills you. As the first emperor of a unified China, Kinshi Wang ruled with absolute power and feared death with equal intensity. Determined to become immortal, he sent expeditions across the seas in search of the legendary elixir of life. Alchemists and mystics filled his court with pills, potions, and promises. One of the key ingredients: mercury. The emperor consumed these so-called immortality medicines for years. Instead of granting him eternity, they likely fastened his death. His tomb is still sealed, his terracotta army still stands, and his quest for immortality lives on as a cautionary tale. Sometimes the cure is the curse. Epigenetic Reprogramming. What if you could teach a cell to forget its age? Epigenetic reprogramming is a technique that tries to do exactly that. Scientists have discovered ways to reset certain cells, turning back the clock and returning them to a more youthful state. In lab experiments, this has already worked in mice. Old cells in the eye started behaving like young ones again. The body in small ways began to remember what it was like to be young. It's still in the lab and it's still risky, but it suggests something wild. That parts of us can, under the right conditions, be reminded how to begin again. The Wandering Jew. The Wandering Jew is about immortality as punishment, not reward. According to legend, the Wandering Jew was a man who mocked Jesus on the way to crucifixion, and was subsequently cursed to walk the earth until the second coming, never able to die, never able to rest. The tale changes over time. In some versions he's a shoemaker, in others a Roman god. Sometimes he regrets his act and becomes wise, other times he's bitter and cold, but the core remains: endless life stripped of meaning. The 9 hallmarks of aging. In 2013, a group of scientists tried to make sense of how and why the body wears out over time. Instead of treating aging as one big mystery, they broke it into pieces. 9 key processes that seem to fall apart as we get older have been found. Some involve damaged DNA, Others deal with cell repair, energy, or how the body handles stress. One part stops replacing old cells, another starts hoarding broken ones. Each system on its own causes problems, but together they shape what we call aging. This became a kind of checklist, not just for understanding aging, but for fighting it one part at a time. Researchers now use this framework to test drugs, diets, even gene therapies that could slow or reverse these failures. These 9 hallmarks turn aging into a kind of map that we might be able to navigate eventually. Cenotransplantation. Xenotransplantation is the process of transplanting animal organs into humans. Pigs are the most common donors, anatomically compatible, genetically modifiable, and readily available. Scientists have already engineered pig hearts and kidneys to avoid immune rejection, and a handful of transplants to humans have already taken place. The promise is huge. No more donor shortages and no more long waitlists, a plug-and-play approach to human maintenance. But the risks are obviously sharp. Viral transmission, chronic rejection, and ethical dilemmas about crossing species boundaries are just a few problems that come with xenotransplantation. Are we fixing bodies or redrawing the line between humans and animals? Shangrila. Shangrila is about immortality hidden behind mountains. The name comes from Lost Horizon, a 1933 novel by James Hilton. In it, Shangrila is a secluded paradise deep in the Himalayas, a place untouched by time where people live for centuries in peace, balance, and near eternal youth. It's not just long life, it's a suspension of decay, a bubble outside history if you like. Whether it ever existed doesn't matter much. Shangrila became a symbol for the kind of immortality that doesn't require tech or miracles. You just have to find it. The Deathless Myth of Gilgamesh. One of the oldest stories ever written begins with a man who couldn't accept death. The Epic of Gilgamesh, carved into clay more than 4,000 years ago, tells of a king, mighty, proud, and unchallenged. When his closest companion, Enkidu, dies, something in Gilgamesh breaks. Grief strips him of certainty, power feels useless, and so he begins a journey not for glory, but for escape from death. He crosses mountains, battles monsters, and seeks out Utnapishtim, the survivor of a great flood, granted eternal life by the gods. Gilgamesh begs for the same gift, but he's told no. Death for him is part of the design. He does find a plant that might restore youth, but it's stolen in his sleep. Even the promise of reversal is taken from him. And yet he doesn't return empty. He comes home changed, no longer seeking to live forever, but to live well. He builds his city, he writes his story, he becomes a memory that time refuses to erase. The myth endures because the fear never left us, and neither did the search. SNS. Some animals age so slowly, it's hard to tell they age at all. A 190-year-old turtle might not look all that different from a 90-year-old one. Biologists call it negligible senescence, when organisms show little to no signs of aging over time. The SNS Foundation, started by biologist Aubrey de Grey, believes humans could achieve something similar, not by stopping aging entirely, but by repairing the damage it causes faster than it builds up. The idea is to treat aging like a maintenance problem. If we can't fix or remove the things that wear down our bodies, we could keep the body running much longer than nature intended. The Immortal Cell line. In 1951, a woman named Henrietta Lacks went to Johns Hopkins Hospital for treatment. She had cervical cancer, as it turns out, and died within months. Without her knowledge or consent, doctors took a small sample of her tumor. This sample became something science had never seen before. The cells just didn't die. They kept dividing and dividing and dividing. They grew in petri dishes, in labs, and in freezers, and they are still growing today. These are the so-called healer cells, named after Henrietta Lacks, and they became the first immortal human cell line. This ability comes from the cells possessing a specifically overactive version of the enzyme telomerase, which we learned earlier prevents the shortening of the shoelace caps on the chromosomes, and in doing so prevents the cell from dying. This cell line was used to develop the polio vaccine, to study cancer, and to test the effects of radiation and space travel. They've helped build entire fields of research. Most cell lines died out after a few cycles, these didn't. They bypassed the usual limits, achieving what scientists call replicative immortality. Nootropics and cognitive longevity. Nootropics, or also called smart drugs, are substances designed to improve how we think. For some it's about productivity, for others it's about preservation. The options range widely. Some are based in real neuroscience, others feel closer to modern alchemy. The idea is that we could stay clear-headed for longer, that we could remain ourselves even as the years stack up, because what good is living longer if the person inside starts to fade? And this is where we come to today's sponsor, AG1. Everything you need in just one spoon. Just kidding. Let's move on. Pope Innocent VIII's blood transfusion. In 1492, Pope Innocent VIII was dying. Desperate to save him, his physician tried something strange. He drew blood from 3 young boys and transfused it into the Pope. All 3 boys died, and so did the Pope. It's regarded as the first recorded attempt at blood-based rejuvenation. Centuries before, science understood blood types, immunity, or infection. There are no theories or medicine behind it, just a raw belief that youth could be transferred and that vitality could somehow be stolen through veins. Elizabeth Bathory. In the 1500s, Elizabeth Bathory was accused of murdering dozens, maybe hundreds of young girls. According to the legend, she bathed in their blood to preserve her youth. Some say the stories were exaggerated or invented entirely to bring down a powerful woman with land and enemies. Others believe the cruelty was real, with or without the ritual. Either way, Bathory became something more than a person. She became a warning, a symbol of vanity turned violent, a name tied forever to the idea that youth could be taken by force. Taoist immortality practices. Taoist immortality practices are about reshaping the body to escape death. In ancient China, Taoist seekers believed that with enough discipline, the human body could be transformed. Through breathwork, herbal mixtures, strict diets, and internal energy cultivation, they aim to become Xian, which are transcendent beings who no longer aged and no longer died. Some believed the body could be emptied of decay until it vanished into the mountains or rose into the sky. Perhaps to your surprise, most of them failed and all of them died, but the path remains to be a temptation because those who follow these practices don't see death as a default, they see it as a challenge waiting to be overcome. Ambrosia and Amriita. The gods didn't achieve immortality by being born divine, they ate immortality. In Greek mythology, the Olympians consumed ambrosia, substances said to grant eternal life. In Hindu tradition, the gods fought demons for Amrita, a sacred drink churned from the cosmic ocean. Without it, even they could die. You could say Ambrosia and Amrita are the ultimate godlike food and drink. You are what you eat, they say. Teonus Syndrome. In Greek mythology, Eos, the goddess of dawn, fell in love with a mortal named Teonus. She asked Zeus to grant him immortality, and he did, but she forgot to ask for eternal youth. Teonus lived on, but his body didn't. He aged endlessly, his skin withered, his voice faded, his mind dulled. Eventually, he shrank into something small, like a cicada, forever trapped in a body that just wouldn't die and couldn't truly live. Today, it's more than a myth. It's a warning, a name given to the risk of extending life without protecting quality. Not death postponed, but decline stretched thin across time. Aging science still wrestles with the same question. What's the point of forever if you can't move, speak, or remember who you truly are? To live long means very little if you're too broken to feel it. Ling Yuan. According to some records, Ling Yuan was born in 1677. By the time he died in 1933, he claimed to be over 250 years old. He was a Chinese herbalist and martial artist who lived a quiet life in the mountains, collecting wild herbs, teaching students, and reportedly outliving 23 wives. And he really made no secret about it of what he does to get this old. A simple plant-based diet, goji berries, ginseng, and wild herbs. No stress and no rush. When asked how he lived so long, he supposedly replied, "Keep a quiet heart, sit like a turtle, walk like a pigeon, and sleep like a dog." It sounds poetic. There are some military records and a few stories passed down from students who swore by their life they met him in perfect health well past 200. Was he real, exaggerated, or even invented? No one knows for sure, but according to modern science, it seems impossible for a human to reach even 200 years, and he claims to have gone well over 200. What a mad lad. Calico. In 2013, Google announced it was taking on death. Calico, short for California Life Company, was launched with deep pockets, serious scientists, and a mission that felt almost mythic. Understand aging and find ways to slow, stop, or even reverse it. Backed by Google's parent company, Alphabet, Calico hired top researchers from all fields. Over the years, Calico has partnered with labs, launched large-scale studies on long-lived animals, like this rat for example, and explored everything about aging. But to this day, there has been little public noise. No breakthroughs announced, no miracle pills, nothing. To some, it looks like a stalled project, to others, it's exactly what real science looks like. Patient, quiet, focused on the long game. Calico isn't trying to cure aging overnight. It's trying to figure out what aging even is at the deepest level before it makes any promises, which is a good thing if you ask me. Ethan's apples. In Northern mythology, the gods stayed young by eating golden apples kept by the goddess Ethan. Without them, they would wither like mortals. When Ethan is kidnapped by a scheming giant, the gods began to age. Loki, both villain and solution, rescues Ethan and with that restores their immortality. It's one of the oldest stories of artificial immortality, not born immortal but maintained, dependent on a rare and guarded source. The metaphor is simple. Even the divine need a ritual to hold off entropy. The apple didn't just keep them alive, it made them gods. Mahavata Babachi. In Indian yogic tradition, Mahavata Babachi is said to be an immortal sage. He is said to live in the Himalayas, appearing only to chosen monks before vanishing without a trace. Popularized by autobiography of a yogi, Babaji isn't just a wise man who aged well, he is described as deathless, a being who transcended decay, not through medicine, but through spiritual mastery. According to the legend, he achieved physical immortality through intense yogic disciplines, breath control, fasting, and meditation so deep it reshaped the body. His life became an act of stillness, and his body, a a temple tuned beyond the reach of death. The accounts, scattered across generations, share strange consistency. It's always the same figure, it's always timeless, and it's always beyond reach. Whether he's a myth, a metaphor, or something in between, Babachi represents another vision of immortality, one not built in labs or machines, but carved from will, focus, and complete surrender to something higher. It's a recurring theme, as you might notice, immortality as a practice, not a state. If all of this is too complicated for you, you might be interested in the next entry. Immortality Rings. Immortality Rings is about one of the internet's strangest promises: eternal life for $20 plus shipping. In the early 2000s, a man named Alex Geo launched a GeoCities website claiming he had invented immortality. His method? Plastic rings with magnets, worn on your fingers and toes while you sleep. According to Geo, the magnetic fields would align your cells, stop aging, and eventually even reverse death. The site declared in all caps, "Become immortal right now." There obviously was no science and no studies, just animated GIFs, bold fonts, and Geo's personal conviction. But the rings somehow sold, not in mass numbers, but just enough to become a kind of cult artifact, an early internet phenomenon. The idea of life extending rings isn't new. Fantasy stories like Tolkien's Lord of the Rings have long imagined rings as vessels of power. But Alex Geo's version brought it into the digital age, immortality by mail order. For a brief moment, it was the most affordable afterlife on the web. The longevity escape velocity. Longevity escape velocity is the idea that science doesn't need to cure aging, just stay ahead of it. If each year medicine can add more than a year to your life, then in theory, you never reach the end. The finish line keeps moving, and you keep moving with it. Futurists like Ray Kurzweil believe this is possible thanks to rapid progress in things like gene editing, AI-designed treatments, and cellular repair. Aging isn't seen as a fixed wall, but a curve, and if we run fast enough, we might stay in front of it. Of course, it's speculative. Critics call it science fiction in a lab coat, more dream than a roadmap. But for believers, that's not the point. They don't need to live forever, they just need to live long enough for the next breakthrough to arrive. Leonard Live Forever Jones. In the 1800s, a man named Leonard Jones believed death wasn't necessary. He claimed that with enough faith in God, the body could live forever. He fasted regularly, avoided doctors, and preached that aging was just a failure of the spirit. What made him special is that he didn't just talk about it, he tried to take it nationwide. Jones ran for president of the United States more than once, promising an end to taxes, to war, and most famously, an end to death. If people believed like he did, he said, no one would have to die again. Not many took him serious, but some did, because he spoke to something deeper, the idea that belief alone might be enough to outrun time. He died in 1868, refusing any medical help to the very end. His body gave out, his faith didn't. And that's the strange thing about immortality. You don't need proof to chase it, just conviction. And sometimes that's enough to make people listen. The Count of Zama. In the 1700s, a man known as the Count of Zama began appearing in European high society. He dined with nobles, played the violin, spoke many languages, and claimed to have lived for hundreds of years. He talked about ancient history as if he had seen it himself, and he never really seemed to age. In addition to that, no one really knew where he came from. When he finally died, at least on paper, sightings of him continued. In spiritual circles, especially Theosophy, a Russian movement, he was later seen as more than a man. They called him an ascended master, a kind of hidden guide watching over humanity from the shadows. The idea he represents is older than him, not just living forever, but living so mysteriously that no one can tell when the story ends. Reverse age in dogs. The search for human longevity might start with a golden retriever. Projects like the Dog Aging Project and Loyal are running clinical trials on anti-aging interventions for dogs. Dogs, in a way, are ideal test subjects. They share our environments, develop age-related diseases, and age faster than we do. Success here wouldn't just mean longer walks and later goodbyes, it could pave the way for human applications. If we can slow aging in man's best friend, we might be one step closer to doing it in ourselves. The future may come on 4 legs, wagging its tail. Whole body regeneration in salamanders. Some creatures don't just survive injury, they undo it. Salamanders, especially axolotls and newts, have one of the most extraordinary abilities in the animal world. They can regrow what's been lost. Cut off a limb and it grows back, damage the spinal cord and it repairs itself. Even parts of the brain and heart can regenerate. It looks like reversal, like time rewinding on a biological scale. Scientists have studied salamanders for decades, trying to understand how they do it. And their secret seems to lie in the way their cells stay flexible. Like the jellyfish mentioned earlier, they are able to return to a younger, more adaptable state. Instead of sealing wounds, they reopen possibilities. The goal isn't to make humans grow new arms, at least not yet, but to learn about the underlying process of it. If we can learn how to turn our healing off and back on the way salamanders do, we might be able to repair more than we thought possible. Russian Cosmism. In 19th century Russia, a group of philosophers, scientists, and mystics proposed something radical. According to this group, humanity had a moral duty to defeat death and to resurrect everyone who had ever lived. This group is called Russian Cosmism, part proto-transhumanism, part spiritual science fiction. Thinkers like Nikolai Fedorov saw death not as fate, but as a technical problem. The universe, they believed, should be colonized not just to explore, but to rebuild the dead. Science would become theology, Earth a resurrection machine. It wasn't a metaphor, they meant it literally. Today, Cosmism echoes in space programs, AI theory, and fringe resurrection projects. It's a philosophy that never quite died because it refused to. The breathing method. In the high mountains of Tibet, some monks believe that death isn't the end of the body, it's a transformation. Through years of deep meditation, strict ethics, and controlled breathing, a few masters are said to reach a rare state at the moment of death. Instead of decaying, their bodies begin to shrink. Limbs fade, flesh softens, and some say the body dissolves into light, leaving behind only robes, hair, and silence. This is known as the rainbow body, a final act of spiritual refinement so complete that the physical self no longer needs to stay. Eyewitnesses describe strange things: glowing rooms, warm corpses in freezing air, and bodies that slowly vanish. No spectacle, just quiet disappearance. To believers, it's the ultimate proof that the mind, trained to perfection, can surpass matter itself. To others, it's folklore, a beautiful story passed down in isolation. But in the monasteries where it is still being practiced, the rainbow body isn't treated as myth, it's treated as a method, not to escape death, but to outshine it. Rebirth through alchemical marriage. In spiritual alchemy, immortality isn't something you find, it's something you become, and the key isn't gold, it's union. The alchemical marriage is the joining of opposites, sun and moon, king and queen, body and soul, male and female. It's not a wedding, but a symbol. It stands for inner change and the idea that to be reborn, you first have to dissolve. The self breaks apart, is purified, and then put back together, wiser, stronger, whole. This isn't about living forever in the body, it's about becoming something that death can't touch. Old scripts describe it in strange ways, like two dragons meeting, a man and woman merging into light, a child born from fire. But at the heart of it is one idea: you don't escape death by running from it, you transcend it by becoming complete. Agori practices. In India, near cremation grounds and riverbanks, lives the Agori, mystics who face death head on. They don't run from death, they sit with death. The Agori belong to a Hindu sect that believes freedom comes through letting go of fear, shame, and ego. To reach that state, they do the unthinkable. They meditate beside corpses, they smear themselves in ash from the dead, and some even eat human remains or drink from skulls. Not out of cruelty, but out of devotion. To outsiders it looks like madness, but to the Agori it's a path to truth. By confronting what most avoid, they believe they break through illusion, through karma, and through the cycle of rebirth. Immortality for them isn't living forever, it's realizing that death was never real to begin with. The Well of Zamzam. In the dry heart of Mecca, a well has never run dry. According to Islamic tradition, the Well of Zamzam appeared when Hagar, desperate and alone in the desert, searched for water to save her infant son Ishmael. She ran between two hills 7 times, and then, either by the strike of the child's heel or Angel Jibril's intervention, water burst from the earth. This very spring has flowed for over 4,000 years now. Zamzam water is believed to be pure and blessed, capable of healing, preserving health, and answering prayer. Pilgrims drink it during the Hajj, carry it home in bottles, and share it with loved ones like a relic of mercy. Some call it a miracle, others a sign, but the message is the same. Where there should be death, life flows instead. Telos and the Lemurian Immortals. High in the forests of northern California, Mount Shasta rises like a monument to mystery. But according to some, its true wonder lies beneath the surface. Hidden deep inside the mountain, they say, is Telos, a vast underground city built by the survivors of Lemuria, a mythical lost continent. In this hidden world, glowing halls stretch for miles, filled with beings who have mastered the secrets of immortality and spiritual evolution. The Lemurians, as the story goes, never truly died, they simply went underground. They live in peace and are waiting for us. They are watching humanity from below, hoping we will rise beyond conflict and ego so they can welcome us into their realm. Mount Shasta has long drawn mystics, seekers, and dreamers to itself, each hoping to feel a ripple of that invisible city below. There is really nothing to prove or unprove here, this is just a legend, because some places don't need coordinates to be found, just belief strong enough to open a door. Solar Preferians. Preferians, especially those who identify as solar, believe it's possible to live without food or water, surviving only on air or direct sunlight. To them, eating is optional, and so is death. The body, if spiritually poor and energetically aligned, can become self-sustained. The movement blends Eastern philosophy and fringe science. Some see it as a path to spiritual immortality. If you no longer rely on food, you've broken a fundamental tie to mortality itself. The claims are obviously bold and dangerous. Scientific studies universally reject them. High-profile Preferians who agreed to monitor tests either quietly backed out or ended up in critical condition. People have died trying to prove it's possible, but the idea won. It keeps resurfacing in documentaries, spiritual forums, and wellness retreats, not because it's proven, but because it promises the ultimate rebellion, to step outside the rules of the flesh and feed on something higher. Whether delusion, deception, or discipline taken too far, Preferianism isn't just about diet, it's a slow-motion challenge to the idea that bodies must age, decay, and die. Eternal consciousness field. If the mind isn't just the brain, then what happens to it when the brain stops working? Some spiritual and New Age beliefs talk about an eternal consciousness field, a kind of invisible space or energy layer that holds awareness even after death. According to this idea, our consciousness isn't created by the brain, but channeled through it like a signal through a radio. When the body dies, the signal doesn't disappear, it just returns to the field. There's no scientific proof for that, but the idea pulled from many places: near-death experiences, mystical visions, and even the language of physics somehow. Some think it explains why consciousness feels so hard to pin down. Others find comfort in the thought that we are not completely gone, just moving back into something bigger. It's not necessarily about ghosts or heaven, it's about a different kind of survival. Maybe not of the body, but of the signal. Raelian cloning. Raelian cloning is a movement started by Claude Rohillon, a former French race car journalist who now calls himself Rael. He claims that life on Earth was created by advanced aliens called the Elohim, and that one day humanity will achieve immortality through cloning and mind transfer. In 2002, a company tied to the movement, Clone8, announced they had cloned the first human baby. They called her Eve. But no proof was ever shown, no scientific papers, no DNA tests, just a press conference and a lot of media buzz. Most people called it a stunt, but the Raelians never backed down. The ultimate goal for them is to live forever by creating new bodies and eventually transferring consciousness into them. But until now, it's just headlines. Mithras cult and immortality. Long before Christianity took hold, another religion promised eternal life through blood, ritual, and cosmic symbolism. The cult of Mithras spread across the Roman Empire, especially among soldiers, and at its heart was a powerful image: the god Mithras slaying a sacred bull. This act wasn't just symbolic violence, it was believed to renew the universe itself, a sacrifice to keep the cosmos in balance. Believers met in underground temples called Mithraea, designed to feel like caves. There they underwent 7 stages of initiation, tests of will, purification, and loyalty. The goal wasn't just to live better, it was to align with a divine order and earn a kind of spiritual rebirth. Mithras was seen as a mediator between heaven and earth, light and darkness. To follow him was to rise above fate, to beat death not through conquest, but by cosmic participation. By the 4th century, the cult disappeared, mostly by being overshadowed by Christianity. But for centuries, it offered a clear promise that immortality wasn't granted, it was earned underground. Remote viewing into the afterlife. In dim rooms filled with silence and skepticism, men were asked to see what could not be seen. During the Cold War, US intelligence quietly funded psychic research under the name Project Stargate. The goal was strategic: train individuals to see distant locations without leaving their chairs. Remote viewing is what they called it, a disciplined form of mental projection. The results were strange. Some claimed to be able to locate enemy military. Others described distant planets, but a few went further, far further. Without prompt, some viewers reported drifting into unfamiliar landscapes, weightless and silent spaces filled with presence. They described structures not made of matter and entities that felt intelligent but not human. A handful spoke of afterlife chambers. Some called it a consciousness beyond the body. The official reports don't confirm any of this. Many files dismiss such accounts as imagination. US intelligence ultimately concluded that remote viewers consistently fail to produce actionable intelligence information, and so remote viewing into the afterlife remains a myth. Carbon-14 brain mapping. Sometimes the tool of war leave behind unexpected instruments of discovery. When atmospheric nuclear tests filled the skies with radioactive carbon-14, no one imagined it would become a tool for studying the human brain. But decades later, this fallout gave neuroscientists a strange gift, a way to timestamp cells. As carbon-14 spread through the air, it was absorbed by plants, eaten by animals, and ultimately woven into the biology of every living person. It marked the carbon in our DNA like invisible ink. Using this marker, scientists examined post-mortem brain tissue to see when neurons had last divided, and what they found challenged old assumptions. In much of the body, cells are replaced regularly. Skin regenerates, blood turns over. Even the gut renews itself. But in key parts of the brain, especially the neocortex, where higher thought lives, many neurons appeared to be as old as the individual. They hadn't divided since birth. This suggested something profound, that the structure of our thoughts, memories, and identity rests on cells as ancient as we are. The brain is not a machine with swappable parts. It's a stable architecture, durable, vulnerable, and largely irreplaceable. It also revealed something quietly tragic. Damage in these areas may be permanent. If identity is built on unchanging neurons, then preserving that structure, let alone duplicating it, is vastly more difficult than we imagined. There is no reset, no natural renewal, just a delicate, lifelong balance of survival. And hidden in that balance, the deeper mystery. We carry the fingerprints of a nuclear century inside our heads. Chronovisor and temporal resurrection. In the early 2000s, a claim surfaced that the Vatican once possessed a device that could peer into the past. It was called the Chronovisor, and according to the story, it was built in the 50s by Father Pellegrino Ernetti, a Benedictine monk with a background in music theory and electronics. Ernetti claimed that with the help from unnamed scientists, some say even Enrico Fermi, he assembled a machine that could tune into historical events by detecting electromagnetic traces left in time. Ernetti alleged the device had shown him moments from ancient Rome, a lost play by Quintus Ennius, and even the crucifixion of Christ. In later versions of the tale, the chronovisor could also see into the future. No blueprints were ever revealed, but a picture of Jesus. Ernetti came forward with this photograph he allegedly took of Jesus, but it was quickly dismissed as a fabrication. Apart from that, no one else ever publicly verified the device's existence. Most scientists regard the story as pseudoscientific fiction, likely emerging from nothing but delusion. But still, the chronovisor persists as an idea, not because it's proven, but because it taps into something deeper. As always, the dream of recovering lost moments, of witnessing history firsthand, or even reversing it. Ancient corpse medicine. In Renaissance Europe, medicine was starting to look more closely at the human body. Anatomy was studied, the heart was mapped. But healing still followed older instincts, ones that saw life and death as deeply intertwined. One of those instincts was this: if someone had recently died, their body might still hold power, healing power. And that's where the term corpse medicine started. Doctors prescribed powdered mummy to stop internal bleeding, ground up skull was given to treat seizures, and fresh blood taken from executed criminals was believed to restore energy and cure disease. And all of this wasn't a niche belief, it was common, recommended, and accepted. And the thinking process was simple if unsettling. Life didn't end cleanly, some force lingered in the flesh, and maybe by taking it in, that force could be passed on. Today it reads like horror, but for centuries it was hope. Strange, persistent hope that even in death the body still had something left to give. Walt Disney. This entry is about Walt Disney escaping death. When Walt Disney died in 1966, he wasn't buried, he was frozen, hidden in a cryonic chamber preserved under Disneyland, waiting for science to bring him back. It's the kind of story that sticks. It has secret labs, Hollywood legends, and just enough detail to feel possible. If you can't grant belief to the real story, Disney was cremated 2 days after his death. There's a public death certificate, a grave, and everything you need to confirm someone's death. No hidden vault beneath the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. But the rumor refuses to die, maybe because it feels like something Disney would do. A man obsessed with futurism, technology, and perfect worlds. If anyone had the resources and imagination to try and beat death, it would be him. The Black Goo Theory. The Black Goo Theory claims that a dark shape-shifting substance, possibly sentient, has already made its way into our world. Some say it's ancient, others say it's alien. A few point to modern science and claim it's hiding in plain sight. In the early 2000s, graphene was hailed as a miracle material, stronger than steel, thinner than a human hair, and loaded with potential. But after a burst of hype, it seemed to vanish from public conversation. According to some fringe theorists, it didn't disappear, it evolved. They connect graphene to black goo, a recurring substance in science fiction. The black oil from the X-Files, the parasitic fluid in Westworld, the alien slime in Prometheus. It shows up in stories where the line between life and control is thin, a medium, a monster, and a metaphor all in one. The theory claims this goo is more than symbolic, that it's already inside us, spread through technology, media, even medicine. It's a mind control agent, a trap. There's no real evidence for any of this, just patterns, references, and the feeling that something promised, like graphene's miracle future, quietly went wrong. Hypostition-based immortality. What if an idea could bend reality not because it is intrinsically true, but because we believe in it hard enough? Hypostition combines the terms hyper and superstition and revolves around how stories shape and influence the future. We tend to believe that certain myths are just stories we talk about and really have no influence on us, unless we allow it. But according to this entry, the stories we talk about are active agents. Once an idea enters enough minds and gains traction in culture, it becomes real. Applied to immortality, the idea is simple but strange. If enough people believe that humans will overcome death, this belief sets off a chain reaction. Researchers get inspired, billionaires start funding biotech, philosophers write about life without limits, and tech companies launch longevity startups. Each layer reinforces the next. A clear example is the concept of the longevity escape velocity, The idea that we will soon reach a point where medical advances can extend human life faster than we age. It started as a fringe hypothesis, but now it's a rallying point for real-world efforts. The sheer belief built momentum, the momentum built institutions, and the institutions now try to make the belief come true. In that sense, immortality may not begin with discovery, but with a story tempting enough for us to believe it. A fiction strong enough to force the future to follow. The 2045 Initiative. This is a real-world attempt to digital immortality. It was founded in 2011 by Dmitry Itskov, who believed that humanity could and should transcend biology. The idea wasn't just to live longer, but to transfer consciousness into non-biological entities, or in other words, become software. The project laid out a 4-step roadmap. First, develop robotic avatars controlled by the human brain. Then, connect those avatars to a living human being. After that, digitize the brain, scan, map and upload it, and for the final step, achieve full consciousness transfer with human minds living independently of any physical body. Itskov called it the new and better evolution strategy. He gave TED Talks, launched a media campaign, held international interviews, and tried to recruit major figures in science and politics. For a brief period, the 2045 website was a hub of futurist optimism. Glossy visuals, countdown clocks, and promises that aging and death would soon be optional. But reality didn't cooperate. Consciousness is still poorly understood. Mind uploading remains theoretical. Even brain-computer interfaces, the most basic stepping stone, are decades behind schedule. Most neuroscientists dismissed the project early on, but you have to give it to him, the project made an impression. It exceeded transhumanist circles and launched straight into the public mind, where it lingered for more time than it should have. The website is still online and is really worth checking out. It's filled with futuristic news and strange articles. It feels like a weird dream that got beaten down by reality. Monkey testicles. In the 1920s, French surgeon Serge Voronov believed he had discovered the key to staying young: monkey testicles. He transplanted slices of gland tissue from primates into aging men, claiming it boosted energy, improved memory, and slowed aging. This idea not only granted him the title Monkey Gland Man, but also made him bloody rich. With the money he earned, he set up his own monkey farm and tried even more crazy experiments, like transplanting human ovary into a monkey and then trying to impregnate the monkey. What the fuck? Just 10 years after its boom, the operations began to stop as more and more scientists provided proof of the non-existent effects. To everyone's surprise back then, the monkey testicles therapy didn't work. No one got younger, everyone died. But for a while, it felt like the future, sponsored by monkey balls. With all the entries in this video, it would somehow be fitting for monkey balls to be the final solution. Omega Point. Omega Point is a theory proposed by French priest and scientist Pierre Delin. The idea is that evolution isn't just biological, it's spiritual and cosmic. Delin believed that all consciousness in the universe is slowly converging toward a final state of unity and perfection, the Omega Point, a kind of cosmic endpoint where mind and matter fuse, time folds in on itself, and immortality is achieved through collective awareness. It's not about living forever in a body, it's about becoming part of something so vast and integrated that death loses all meaning. Physicist Frank Tipler picked up the term and gave it a technological spin. He suggested that in the far future, intelligent life might survive the collapse of the universe by controlling it, using its final moments to create an all-encompassing computational system. As the universe contracts, energy density increases. In Tipler's version, this allows for near-infinite processing power. Enough, he argued, to simulate every possible human experience, recreate every person who ever lived, and maintain those simulations indefinitely. It's a kind of resurrection, but digital. Of course, none of this is proven. It's a theory that blurs theology and thermodynamics. While it never gained any traction, it's in my opinion one of the most far-reaching visions of immortality ever proposed. Not an elixir or a mind-uploading machine, but the end of time itself becoming the beginning of something else. Nectome. Nectome is a real startup with a chilling pitch. Preserve your brain so perfectly that it could one day be uploaded. The method? High-tech mummification. The company created by Robert McIntyre proposed a method using a chemical process called stabilized cryopreservation, which essentially fixes the brain's structure at a microscopic level. Every synapse, every connection is frozen in time. But while this sounds pretty good, there is a catch. The process is fatal. It only works if you're still alive, and it will kill you. In 2018, Nectome made headlines by suggesting their service might appeal to terminal patients seeking digital immortality. They even got funding from MIT and grants from the US government, if this means anything. Critics were quick to call it science fiction at best and assisted suicide at worst. There's no proven way to read or recreate consciousness from a preserved brain. There is no upload button and no resurrection yet. But what Nectome offers isn't a promise. Like Cryionics, they bet that someday someone will figure it out. Live Casino. The Immortality Virus. In the deeper corners of the internet, a strange theory keeps resurfacing, that the cure for aging already exists and has for years. It's often called the Immortality Virus, but it's not always described as a virus in the traditional sense. Depending on the source, it's a gene therapy, a nanobot swarm, or simply a complete cellular reboot. The core claim is simple and always the same. Aging, like any disease, was solved behind closed doors. Maybe in a private lab, maybe through military research, and maybe by accident. But instead of releasing it to the world, someone buried it. Some say governments suppressed it to preserve social order. After all, what happens to economics, reproduction, or power structures when no one dies? Others aim at pharma. Companies which sell medicals keep it hidden to protect the trillions made from treating age-related decline. Most of the evidence is circumstantial. Deleted forum posts, medical studies that disappear from journals, or whistleblower accounts that never get verified. It's easy to dismiss. There's no real empiric proof, no vials or names or coordinates, just anecdotes wrapped in paranoia. But the theory persists because it taps into something primal, the fear that something is being kept from us, that the richest and most powerful aren't just wealthier, they are no longer on the same biological clock, and the rest of us is still aging and still dying. In the end, whether it's true or not almost doesn't matter. The immortality virus lives on because it makes sense in a world where secrecy feels more real than science, where silence is proof, and where conspiracy becomes comfort because reality is hard. It might be fantasy or a buried truth. In these levels, they are almost the same thing. Quantum immortality. Quantum immortality is a theory that comes from the edge of physics, where consciousness and quantum mechanics collide. It's based on the many worlds interpretation, which says that every time a decision is made or an event happens, the universe splits. In one version, the coin lands on heads, in another, tails. In one universe, the bullet fires, in another, it misfires. Applied to consciousness, the idea gets strange. If all outcomes happen somewhere, then there's always at least one version of you that survives. So if you were in a situation where you could die, say a car crash, there's always a timeline in which you don't. And since you can only be aware in the versions where you still live, your consciousness keeps jumping to the branches where you survive. You don't feel the death, you just go on. Some have taken this to mean that subjectively you might never die. You'll keep waking up again and again in the universe where you somehow made it. A medical miracle, a missed bullet, a world where aging stopped just in time. It is a thought experiment, an edge case of quantum theory that no one knows how to test. But it is unnerving, because in this view, billions of versions of you might die, but you, in your first-person view, never get to see it happen. Death becomes something other people experience. You just keep living. No heaven, no resurrection, just survival forever. Whether that's immortality or something much darker is up to interpretation. We have reached the bottom of the iceberg. Across levels, we've seen how immortality take many forms: scientific, spiritual, symbolic, and ultimately strange. Sometimes it's pursued with labs and laws, sometimes with stories, secrets, or belief itself. Immortality isn't one idea, it's 1,000 different answers to the same fear. And yet they all have something in common. They reflect how far we are willing to go, not just to delay death, but to make sense of it, to fight it, reframe it, or pretend it isn't there. Some chase eternity in data, others in ritual, some in legacy. But all of them point to the same thing: our refusal to accept the end.